Hello again, my name is Exabu and... oh my, is it the third part already? That's right, here's me covering the fourth and the fifth conference of the Unity of Command 2 Stalingrad DLC, both the alternative history and history branches, from Novorossiysk to Gewitterwolke. And let me just immediately tell you that this is where the alternative branch is gonna start biting your bum. It was kind of easy in Conference 3, but from now on, it's gonna get harder and harder as you push your troops into less and less reasonable objectives that deplete your forces more and more. Meanwhile, the historic branch marks what I think is the hallmark of this entire DLC, which in 2 words is playing defense. Disaster on Volga is the first ever purely defensive scenario of the game. The other 6 scenarios that we're going to discuss today have 2 missions that are defensive in a more traditional for Unity of Command 2 sense, i.e. you attack some and you defend some. These are Gewitterwolke and Stalingrad. And finally you have 2 missions that involve pretty significant and big Soviet counteroffensives, namely Grozny and Baku Coup. All of this means that the time for huge attacks is about to be over, and it feels that we are entering a new era for Unity of Command 2, an era of defensive battles, which I'm totally looking forward to, because Disaster on Volga is anything but. It's easily one of the best missions in the entire game, and is certainly an experience and a great reason for you to go for the historic branch. Also, because of all of this defending, I once again urge you to look at the defensive HQ abilities. All of your German HQs should definitely have the no retreat order, and ideally the counterattack and rear guard. In other words, if you've played through Edelweiss and you've followed my guide, the lessons you learn at Abganerovo will pay off many times over in the subsequent missions. So here, another reason to take the historic track. Alright, now let's look at both of them in the doodle form. Our first mission for today is also the easiest one, and there isn't too much to talk about in Novorossiysk. So let's talk about, well, its objectives. The Taman Peninsula isn't gonna cost you any trouble. As you can see, there are just 2 steps guarding it, and that remaining cavalry division and the landing division are more than enough to kill both of them in time. The area around Novorossiysk and Temis Bay is going to be slightly more complicated, and let me immediately tell you to cover the railway section between Krymska and Krasnodar. The AI will not hesitate to block it, so cover at least those 2 hexes adjoining Krymska. As for the objectives themselves, it's very much a siege and artillery battle. Assemble as much artillery in the area as you can and use breach duos, whereby one infantry division set-piece attacks and the other occupies the hex as a way to squeeze the enemy out of the area and eventually take the objectives. Since this is the first mission in the conference, make sure you actually have those abilities, especially the Romanians. As you can see, the Romanian presence is pretty reasonable here, including artillery pieces, and using them to launch specialist attacks here will be invaluable. And finally, Whoopsie is the most difficult objective of this mission, and the biggest problem here is that your most powerful division here, i.e. the SS Viking, cannot easily fight its way through the mountains, being a motorized unit. So my method is to use the Viking division and some of the adjoining troops to clear the immediate approaches towards Whoopsie, and then as you gain more reinforcements, push along the railway, using feint attacks if you can, using suppressive fire, just make sure you don't use it on Whoopsie, and ultimately take the town using feint attacks and shuffling your troops in and out along the railway. I think this approach can ultimately result in some losses, but this is the most difficult objective after all, and there's nothing else to this mission, so if those deadlines get tight, press your attacks. I have one answer for the Grozny mission. No, you can't take both of them. This is something new for Unity of Command 2, and you either take Caspian Raid or Volga Raid, and no, it doesn't matter which one. Sometimes one will have terrible weather, so go for the other one. They give you the same amounts of prestige and don't offer any special tactical advantages. So push that motorized division towards Holchuta and then to one of the raids, and then immediately back to Holchuta. Make sure you set up a supply hub that is a bit closer to Holchuta so that that motorized division can be fed through normal means. The Soviets will approach the town but will not attack if it's defended by a well-supplied unit. Alright, now let's look at the south and specifically at Mount Elbrus, provided that you keep that mountaineer unit in supply, which isn't that difficult. You have really nothing to worry about. The Soviets are not going to attack them. However, they will tend to advance in the Nalchik area if you keep that front open, and the AI has a tendency of sending a cavalry division into the area between Nalchik and Elbrus with the intention of sneakily block your railway line around Petigorsk. So keeping that Romanian division west of Nalchik to prevent that is a very good idea. Also note the pontoon bridge I built north of Nalchik. This will facilitate the arrival of the tank division near the town. And finally, don't forget about that motorized division northeast of Mozdok. You're not gonna need it there, and it'll come in handy in the south, if anything, to cover your flanks. So the deadlines for Terek, Ordzhonikidze and Grozny aren't too tight, and you have plenty of time to deal with all of them. Your first 2 turns should be devoted to clearing the railway line leading to Terek and repairing the railway bridge, even though setting up a pontoon bridge next to it on turn 1 will help you flood your tanks onto the other bank of the river. By the end of turn 2, you should control the entire railway up to Terek. Take Terek proper if you can, but don't rush it if you can only send a weak unit in there. This is a plain hex, and the enemy is prone to counterattacks here, so wait for another turn and make sure you block the railway line leading to Nalchik. You'll clear those divisions once they run out of supply. And starting with turn 3, you need to push towards Ordzhonikidze. Once again, if your tanks are sufficiently powerful, and they should be, you will handily advance towards Ordzhonikidze. Just make sure you have a strong infantry unit right next to it by turn 7. Just keep clearing that railway line for supplies. And depending on your successes around Ordzhonikidze, I recommend to send 1 or better 2 tank divisions directly to the east and to those plains west of Grozny. This will block the supply for the enemy elite guards infantry. Certainly don't try to clear them while they're still alive and kicking. It's actually a good idea to push these tanks up to Grozny so that you hold hexes next to it, and as soon as Ordzhonikidze falls, you can actually push your infantry into the last remaining objective. Just make sure you keep those flanks tight using your zones of control, especially that little railway section leading up to Terek. And ultimately, Grozny isn't going to be too difficult, certainly not many more difficult than Ordzhonikidze. The AI is a bit zealous about the hexes around Grozny, so use your rearguard counterattack abilities and don't send weak units in there. And one final point, as you can see, the AI has a lot of troops east of Grozny, and around turn 7 it'll launch an attack directed at Mozdok. My suggestion here is to use some of the troops you get later on the mission, in particular that Slovakian motorized division and maybe 1 German infantry division, to protect Mozdok proper. Also, getting your tanks into the area of Grozny early will provide you with an option of crossing the river and blocking the railway line feeding that attack. So don't let those tanks get stuck around Ordzhonikidze more than they should. let's start a discussion of Stalingrad, a genuinely difficult mission, with a few general points that you should keep in mind. 1. Remember that you don't need to hold any of the objectives you are holding in the beginning of the mission. Moreover, it's actually a good idea to leave the Volga positions and south flank objectives. You may retake them by turn 9, and they really don't offer anything but distractions. You could actually move all of those Romanian divisions and the 4th Army HQ north of the river and blow that bridge up and just let the AI waste its tanks taking that railway. Only the northern railway actually matters for your supply. Second point, theater abilities. The bridge you should blow up is the Volga ferry bridge, and if you have any cards that give you an additional ability to blow bridges up, use it to destroy the bridge next to factory districts. I actually had a reusable Brandenburger card which you get in a bunch of missions in this DLC, and the reason for that is, in my experience, the AI isn't too keen on actually repairing those bridges, and by blowing those bridges up, you will actually make it much more difficult for the AI to counterattack both the southern station and the factory district's objectives. You're probably not going to be able to easily clear the hexes around these objectives at the end of the turn on which you take them, and the AI will employ the usual tactic of shuffling its infantry divisions in and out and just exploiting its numerical advantage. Finally, taking the Mamayev Kurgan objective yields you a Luftflotte card, which adds a single-use flying artillery and an additional air support for the rest of the mission, and I advise you to actually use it here, because you will have to deal with difficult counterattacks from the north here, in addition to a tough siege, and that flying artillery and especially additional air support will make the mission much more palatable. Also, speaking of Mamayev Kurgan, don't be zealous about holding it because you don't need to, and the AI will counterattack into it. You can easily waste a few infantry or worse motorized divisions in there, so use your rear guard ability once you take it, and focus on what actually matters. And your immediate concern will be Soviet counterattacks, especially in the north. As I said, remove all of those Romanians from the south. You really don't need that section of the map for now. And so you should focus most of your motorized, mechanized troops on repelling the attacks coming from the north. Obviously, use your zones of control to prevent the AI from blocking the railway lines and supply hubs, and bring in your tanks to deal as much damage to the enemy as possible. And since obviously the AI's attention will be directed towards the objectives, I'd say taking a stand, and I mean it in a very flexible way, around north flank is a really good idea, especially taking that town of Kotluban, because the AI tends to take a few hexes around the objective first, and only then push its numerical advantage. By taking the nearby hexes, you will distract its forces and make it much more difficult for the AI to actually push its objective. If you have very strong tank division, you can actually be successful in the area north of Gorodische. You can launch a big turn 1 raid into that area, dealing as much damage to the Soviets as possible, but be careful about losing those divisions. So defensive ability are your friends here, especially rear guard. You should be somewhat careful here. And speaking of which, your general principle for this mission, in addition to taking all of the objectives, should be conserving your troops, especially your motorized troops, because in the next mission they'll be much more valuable, which is another good reason to use that Luftflotte card, because it'll save you your troops in many situations. Also, don't get too despondent if the Soviets manage minor breakthroughs, take north flank. These breakthroughs are rarely very powerful and are often more of an opportunity than a threat, so cut them off, corner them, destroy them, and bang, you have fewer enemy divisions to deal with. Obviously, your infantry should be focused on taking the objectives inside the city, and I've found that using the saturation strike ability is ideal as you're about to take Southern Station. It can actually cause a lot of damage to the defenders, plus Southern Station is very likely to be the more difficult objective of the two, because you have plenty of time to reach factory districts, and And as you progress in the mission, try to clear the city hexes as much as you can, reasonably can. Don't go too crazy with them. Without the bridges, the Soviets will not be able to easily counterattack there and will just sit in their hexes. But you do need to clear the northern and the southern sections of the city for your eventual retaking of Volga positions and south flank, because given the Soviet counterattacks, you are very unlikely to have more than a couple of turns to do that. Be prepared. Disaster on the Volga is the first of the many disasters we're about to endure, and by God, this mission is very special, if anything, because I think it's the first ever UOC2 mission that is purely defensive. Virtually all of the previous defensive missions involved offensive objectives, like in Herbstnebel or the defense of Moscow, and Disaster on the Volga is a proper disaster. It's nothing like them. You have to run. This is actually my first piece of advice. Run. Don't hold on to anything that you don't need to hold on to. Plus, remember that the mission only lasts for 5 turns. For the most part, you really don't need to worry about protecting that railway that feeds your troops in Stalingrad, i.e. the railway between Surovikino and Stalingrad. The Soviets will just not have the time to properly reach that railway, so you really don't need to worry about it. Maybe except the area west of Volga-Don Canal. So let's start with that whole bit, and obviously the Romanians are not going to hold. The Soviet attacks starting around turn 2 will crush them no matter what you do, so don't even make a pretense of setting up a defensive line in the area. Run towards Marinovka and Karpovka. These Romanians can actually be useful holding both these objectives just in case, and blocking the Soviet advance in that gap between Buzinovka and Volga-Don Canal. Just set up your divisions in an alternating staggered formation and let the Soviets get stuck in the zones of control. This is the only place where they can reasonably reach the railway, so don't let them do that. Blowing up some of those bridges in the area is a good idea. Once you don't need them, feel free to destroy the road bridges next to Marinovka and Karpovka and Buzinovka and Volga-Don Canal. Everything that reduces the Soviet mobility in the area. And this is by far not the only instance of bridge blowing that we'll do in this mission. And so let's look at the other Romanian flank. And I have some really good news for you here. Surovikino is the easiest objective of this mission. Just push all of your Romanian troops there south, except for 3 or 4 divisions to cover the containment objective. The Soviets will not be very active around containment until very late in the mission, and blocking the river against any attempts at crossing it will make it so much easier for you to hold containment. And it's a good idea to use your Romanian HQ to blow those road bridges northeast and northwest of Surovikino, which is where all of the rest of your Romanian troops should move to. Thankfully, you'll get a bunch of reinforcements in that area, and that place will turn into a bulwark for you, whatever counts as bulwark in this disaster. Next up, the German divisions around Golubinska on the west bank of the river. Very simple, you need them in the east. Move them to the east. You've got your pontoon bridge. I've found that using the big bridge next to Kalach is a very good place to move your tank division to the east. Just don't forget to blow these bridges up once there's nobody to cross them except for the enemy, especially that Kalach bridge, which, if it remains intact, can be very useful to the Soviets later in the mission. And actually blowing it up might require you to move your 6th Army HQ to actually reach it, which is a good enough idea in addition to setting up a different supply hub. The one you've got near Stalingrad is a bit vulnerable, so something near Karpovka, probably not inside of it so that the AI doesn't focus on that place specifically, is something you should go for. Ironically, in this disaster you have plenty of trucks, plenty of supply hubs you can remove and reuse somewhere else. And this actually has naturally brought us to the nastiest bit of the mission, this whole pocket around Stalingrad and how to hold the objectives. Let's start with a slightly simpler bit. Replace the Jaeger division in Stalingrad with a normal, full-blooded infantry division. Jaegers have a poor defensive stat and will invite enemy attacks. A normal infantry division will just sit there comfortably, probably even if it's not entrenched. The same is true about Gewitterwolke. Send a decent infantry division to guard it. Use no retreat and entrenchment as available and necessary, and the AI will simply refrain from attacking these hexes, but do also prevent the AI from taking too many hexes around these objectives, because that will invite mass attacks and taking it, and the AI will not be as timid in that case. The nastiest attack is actually gonna come around the northwest perimeter area, and the divisions you bring from the west will be very helpful, and my approach here is not to set up very solid defensive lines. Exploit your zones of control and don't stand right in front of the front line. You will have a couple of turns before the Soviets start attacking there, so it's a good idea to actually place a couple of infantry divisions to the southwest of northwest perimeter and maybe another infantry division or maybe tank division a hex behind them. This will create a big field of nasty zones of control, preventing the AI from making very easy breakthroughs and ultimately exposing its troops, which you should use to destroy at least some of them. The enemy push in the northwest perimeter isn't endless and you can significantly weaken it, so do it. And whenever the enemy breaks through, destroy the breakthrough and re-establish that mesh of zones of control to discourage anything else. And this is one of the approaches you should use elsewhere in the mission. I've already mentioned the Romanian divisions around Volga-Don Canal. And Volga-Don Canal proper is going to be slightly less of a priority at the beginning of the mission. The Soviets there will be a little passive at the beginning, so you'll have a little bit of time to set up your defenses, get a strong unit inside and entrench it, get a bunch of units around that hex, and then just wait for the attack. The attack will come, and trust me, by turn 5, it's gonna be dire everywhere, no matter what you do. I'm certainly talking about the eastern parts of the map. In Sorokin, it's gonna be grand. And so you should be aware of a couple of things. First, most of these divisions, you're not gonna see them ever again, so you can actually sacrifice them by launching attacks that will distract the Soviet machine. Actually, the Red Army is likely to get a little overstretched by turn 5, and you might launch ultimately suicidal but flanking attacks, breaking through. In my successful playthrough, I actually managed to take the big supply hub feeding the entire Soviet endeavor in the southeast of the map, and this, at least for one turn, completely secured the area around Volga-Don Canal. There were no Soviet attacks. They were all trying to clear that breach. You can do similar things around northwest perimeter and Gewitterwolke. Stalingrad generally isn't that hot. It's actually pretty cold in there, to be honest. And the final tip is something that we've already learned in Stalingrad the mission, and it's the value of clearing the hexes around an objective, especially the northwest perimeter. Once again, taking and holding those hexes will distract the Soviets. They will focus on taking those hexes first, and only then going for the objective. And if your main task is winning time, this is a winning strategy. Good luck and enjoy. Baku Coup is arguably the most difficult mission of the 4th and 5th conferences in this DLC, as it is a huge hodgepodge of things you need to do over a huge area. And so let's start with the first thing that becomes very obvious once you switch the fog of war off. The Soviets have a huge army around Kizlyar, and they will not wait to attack. Well, they will wait to attack for a couple of turns and then they'll rush in. And so your approach here will be to blow all of those bridges north of Grozny and set up entrenched troops in the 3 hexes adjoining those X bridges. You may use the mobile Italian divisions and eventually maybe some of the German infantry divisions that come as reinforcements from the west. In any case, if those hexes are well protected, the Soviets will not try and break through in that specific area, and instead they'll conduct an offensive in that gap between the rivers in the area between Grozny and Makhachkala. And this is where your first tank army comes in. It doesn't go anywhere, and its function will be that of a fire brigade. You're probably not gonna manage a proper solid defense there, and you'll probably have to rely on zone of control traps, counterattacks, rear guards, everything that we've seen in Stalingrad, and everything that allows you to attack those advancing enemy units and destroy them, ultimately weakening this whole Soviet endeavor. In any case, no matter what you do there, that railway must remain in your hands, because that's the only source of supply for everything that you'll do in the east, and everything that you'll do in the east will be subject to very tight deadlines. Also, please commit the entirety of the first tank army to defending between Grozny and Makhachkala, except maybe the Viking motorized division, which will go and help out in the Kazbegi Tbilisi area, which actually isn't extremely difficult, and the biggest mistake you can make here is overcommit. So please don't. No more than about 2/3 of the 17th Army, maybe a couple of Italian divisions, and that motorized division should go in there, use your air support, use a flying artillery. You could actually get a flying artillery card in the refinery objective. Just break through at Kazbegi and push in. Kazbegi gives you the Junkers 52 air supply card, and then just gradually clear that area between Kazbegi and Tbilisi. You will be provided with plenty of time to do it. You can actually block the supply of the enemies defending Tbilisi proper by taking the airfield and the railway west of it, but the presence of that airfield is a little hint that you're not going to be able to push any further east. You're simply not going to have any permanent supply connection in the area, and Shirvan will have to be taken from the north, unfortunately. So once you see that Tbilisi is about to fall, start getting those units out, and once that motorized division does its job and Tbilisi is yours and the area is secure, once again send them back towards Ordzhonikidze and Grozny, because things in that area can get extremely hot and extremely dangerous. Finally, the eastern push is going to be rather difficult, mostly because of the already mentioned Shirvan objective, but let's first look at Baku. So immediately use both of your airborne divisions to take Baku or refinery on turn 1. It's actually possible to take Baku if you're lucky with your air support runs. The other one will inevitably go down on turn 2, and though it might seem to be a relatively safe position, I found, at least on hard, the enemy there can be a little aggressive and can launch a wave of suppressive fire, engineer attacks with pretty strong units, which can cause your paratroopers to crumble. And my recommendation here is around turn 4, which is the deadline for Baku, try clearing one of the enemy-held hexes west of Baku. It'll probably take you some losses, but there's no other choice. The purpose of this is similar to what we learned around Stalingrad once again. The AI kind of focuses on owning more than one hex next to its objective, and if it doesn't, it'll get distracted to clear those hexes, or will refrain from attacks altogether, which in this case is your absolute goal. And it certainly worked in my case, at least until my 4th tank army actually arrived in the area. And yes, send your entire 4th tank army along the coast. It's actually a decent idea to blow up that Samur bridge. The Soviets will quickly repair it, but even one turn out of supply will soften up those defenders at Derbent. And it goes without saying that by the beginning of turn 5, you need to be in the hex next to Samur bridge so that you can immediately attack the objectives and take that hex without worrying that that marsh hex will prevent you from entering Samur bridge on time. Once the bridge's yours, give out oversupply to all of your mobile divisions and get as quickly as possible, as far as possible, but make sure to use your recon planes in the area between Sumgaiits, Shemacha, and Shirvan. The AI will impudently use the zone of control maze technique and will happily catch you in that network if you're not prepared for it. The AI will also very likely bring a bunch of its forces to Shirvan because it knows it's one of the objectives, and your goal here will be to get as many mobile troops as close to Shirvan by the beginning of turn 9. I found that just pushing through that plain south of Sumgaiits is the best idea. You're simply not gonna have the time for any cheeky detours, and you'll have to attack the objective head on. Just make sure that you occupy Shirvan with a strong unit and clear at least some of the hexes near it on your side of the river. The AI will not be very passive here, and if it sees an opening, it will counterattack Shirvan and kick you out. But once Shirvan is yours and secure, just turn your sights towards some Sumgaiits. It's not going to be a huge deal, and your paratroopers will help you out. Batumi is a mission that is at the same time difficult and easy, and the difficult part mostly comes from the fact that you will not be able to provide your HQ abilities to all of the troops you'll use to attack in this area, and specifically all of the mountaineer troops in the Kluhor and Nakra Pass areas will be on their own, and let me immediately tell you that Nakra Pass is much less defended, and 2 decent divisions there should do the trick. Kluhor Pass is teeming with enemies, and so all of the remaining reinforcement troops that you'll get early in the mission should go there, especially guys with artillery. You will have to blast through some of those enemies. However, taking Nakra Pass yields you a Brandenburger card, which you can immediately use to blow the bridge up south of Kluhor Pass and make it much easier for the guys in that area. In turn, the Kluhor Pass gives you the air supply card, which I suggest you to use because it's a good idea for the troops that you use to take Nakra Pass to continue south towards Sugidzi and all of those bridges. They will appreciate the supply, and Batumi specifically is the most distant and difficult objective in this mission, and so having a couple of elite troops in that area is a good idea to begin with, and B, preventing the AI from blowing those bridges up, and it will if it sees you advancing, and so this will avoid any unnecessary slowdown for your main troops, which will advance from the northwest. That's right, your HQ should stay with the troops around Tuapse and help them with their push along the coast. It's actually a good idea to play this mission after the Baku Coup, because it's a better chance of ending up with more prestige and better equipping your troops here. You need all the artillery, all the engineers that you can get. None of the individual defenders along your way towards Batumi is particularly strong, maybe in Sochi because of the naval bombardment, but as a whole they're very effective at slowing you down, and so don't let them. Get as many specialist steps, beef up your force, and take Sochi before deadline. Don't spread your forces, focus them on this coastal road and just push, push, push. If you take Sugidzi from the west on turn 8 or 9, you should be alright. Send your best city-busting troops towards Batumi. Kutaisi isn't as urgent, and as you can see, it's not too well protected, and it's not gonna cause you any trouble, unlike Batumi, which, ho ho ho, has naval bombardment, anti-tank gun, artillery, and fully entrenched troops. So getting your best infantry, even if it's just the mountaineers from Nakra Pass, into this area is critical, and taking Batumi on time will probably involve some losses. It's unfortunate, but you'll get battle predictions that will make you reminisce about Moscow 41. So accept your losses and be happy that not the entire campaign is like that. Our last mission for today is Gewitterwolke, which very much is the alternative history counterpart for the disaster on the Volga mission, except that we never properly reached the Volga and now our little adventure in the Caucasus is jeopardized. At the same time, Gewitterwolke is very much a traditional quote-unquote defensive scenario for Unity of Command 2, as we have a bunch of objectives that we need to capture. Although, like in Disaster on the Volga, I wouldn't get too attached to most of the troops you see on the map. I don't think you can avoid significant losses in this mission. And so, without further ado, let's start sustaining them in the most important part of the scenario, the south. Both of your main objectives are there, and given the numbers of the Soviet troops in this area, you can imagine that hoping to destroy them outright is fanciful, to say the least. And your actual goal here will be to use your motorized and tank divisions to push through the southeast. As you can see, it's relatively disorganized and full of holes, and get that tank division as far as possible by the end of turn 2. Ideally reaching the Don in the Proletarsk area, which will cut off the supply of the units west and south of Salsk. Just blocking the railways isn't enough. Look at the levels of enemy supply hubs and weep. And because of all of that, even though the Soviets will be cut off in most parts, there will be a small area next to the river where there will be still supply, and the AI is intelligent enough to actually send its tanks into those areas for a turn to get all of the pizza, and then counterattack, inflicting losses that generally you can't sustain very easily. But that's life, and that's this mission. And in order to assist that heroic tank division, it's actually a good idea to send the infantry you have around Tihoretsk in through the gaps as well. Let the AI push towards Tihoretsk, obviously without letting him take it, and then squeezing your troops through all the zones of control, through any gaps there are, in the direction of Caucasus rail link on turn 2. The purpose of this is obviously to get some of your infantry closer to Salsk and Caucasus rail link, but also to disorganize the Soviets in the area and force them to regroup and maybe counterattack instead of just attacking on the last turn they're actually able to attack as they lose their supply. And I'd say turn 3 is the most critical in this area. Make sure you hold out, don't lose too many troops. Sacrificing weaker divisions doesn't really count, and then proceed to gradually clearing out the area and taking Salsk and Caucasus rail link, with most of the troops in this area completely unable to stop you. Neither of these objectives will be particularly difficult, even though if you really need to, you may use a flying artillery card because you're getting one at Tatsinska. The destroy bridgehead objective isn't urgent, as you can see, and you needn't rush it. Provided you seal it tight from the north, it's not gonna turn into an offensive by the Soviets, and eventually once they run out of supply, you'll just mop them up and not worry about the sparse. There is certainly no reason for you to go north of the river. The Soviets will still be very numerous there, and by the end of the mission, your forces will range from very weak to falling apart. And speaking of falling apart, let's look at that horrible pocket in the northeast. You have 2 comfortable turns with that supply, and you need to move that pocket somewhere. As you can see, Morozovsk and Tatsinskaya are airfields, and if you hold them, you get comfortable supply spots for 4 units. The game kind of invites you to go the Morozovsk-Tatsinskaya route, especially since if you take Morozovsk, it's relatively easy to block the supply of the enemy units breaching through in Tatsinskaya, and on some difficulty levels it can be a preferable route. However, I've found that on hard you get stuck in Morozovsk, and it's way too difficult to push through to Tatsinskaya. So my approach was to breach the Soviet siege in the northwest, and then rush to that pontoon bridge between Tatsinskaya Tatsinsk and Semikarakorsk. This will make it possible for these troops, and especially that tank division that you need to save, with your main troops and more importantly with that supply hub in the Shakhty area, while still retaining that bridgehead between Tatsinsk and Semikarakorsk. As soon as you get those tank division reinforcements in the northwest, send them in to the other side. It actually makes sense to build a more convenient pontoon bridge, and then rush Tatsinsk with your best troops. Don't expect to hold it. The Soviets will bring in very powerful reinforcements in there, so either sacrificing a worthless unit or rearguarding that place is what you should do, especially since you don't really need to block the supply of the attackers west of Tatsinsk. Honestly, I've never found that particular breakthrough to be difficult to deal with as it is. And this is it for today. We're just 7 missions away from completing the entirety of the Stalingrad DLC on hard. And while on the one hand, I'm excited about the quality and the fun factor of these missions, I'm mildly horrified at what conferences 6 and 7 hold in store for me, especially in the alternative branch. And until then, please like, subscribe, all these things, and you'll hear my horror story very, very soon. Cheers.